Okay. Okay, who can whistle? Are we ready to go? Okay, I'm going to just say, okay, this is a tough crowd. I need a whistle.
Yeah,
This is going to be a tough crowd.
get by putting 20 CMOs in a room.
I don't know. There you go. Okay, everybody? Oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know how to start. Okay, that was good. Thank you, Joe. We're just saying, wow, this is quite a crowd, and this is what you get when you put, I don't know, we have 100 CMOs in one room. So I'm going to say welcome. I'm Claudia Malley. I'm the managing director of Economist Impact, and I'm really honored to be here tonight with today with the panel and this audience. The powerful expertise in this room is amazing. I'm excited. We're going to be talking about branding to the boardroom, AI, and the strategic CMO. I really want to thank Infosys for enabling this event and bringing us together, and I'm excited for the outcomes. Our panelists, I'm just going to go top line, and I'm sure as they're chatting, they're going to share more about maybe their background and expertise as they weave into some of their comments. We have Julia Zilberman, who's the global head of client access and markets, banking marketing at Citi. We have Sumit Virmani, who's the Executive Vice President and Global CMO at Infosys. We have Erika, Serow, who's Partner and Chief Marketing Officer at Bain & Company. And Nina Bibby, Chief Marketing Officer at Barclays. And it's nice. I mean, I think this is one of the wonderful side effects of Davos, all the connections that we're making. And hopefully this is not just the beginning of us on the panel, but all of us here in the room. So today's discussion, right, how we're going to talk about the strategic CMO and what is happening from branding to the boardroom. We are working in an incredible time, and with Davos as our backdrop, I think what better moment to be kind of digging into how is the role of the CMO really changing? And what are the strategies being employed that are not just driving top line but bottom line growth? And I think we're at this inflection point and moment where marketing is really driving not just across to the consumers and across the C-suite, but into the boardroom. So really want to dig into why is this happening? Why is marketing and the chief marketing officer more prominent today? And what are those strategies that are enabling us to drive this growth? And I think we're going to start kind of at the top end. We're going to go into some more specifics. This is going to be very interactive. So we're going to talk here, but we're going to pull it out to the audience. So please be thinking. Hopefully you guys will disagree a little bit, make this fun. A little competitive here. So I want you guys to be out on the promenade talking about what you heard here at Infosys today. So let's start with Nina. Diana, to kick it off and set the stage, and how has the role of the chief marketing officer shifted to be more prominent, and what are those strategies you find most valuable?
So, Nina Bibby, I'm going to answer this question quite broadly because my experience as a marketing leader goes across a lot of sectors. So I've worked in FMCG, hospitality, telco, and FS, B2B and B2C. And before I answer that question, if you don't mind, so marketeer, know your audience, I'm going to do a quick poll if you don't mind. So who is pure B2B marketing in here? Hands up. Okay, and then so I'm assuming the rest, maybe a mix of B2B and B2C. Sectors, so FS, few, tech.
You have to raise it. Keep it there.
Okay.
Keep it
Yeah.
Keep it there.
Consultancy. Okay.
Historical.
Well, okay. Right now. Okay. That's good. No, thank you. So that's helpful. So as I think about, the question then, has the role of marketing and the CMO become more prominent? And I think to the extent if it has, it's because marketing is about growth. That is what we do, driving sustainable growth. And obviously that's such an important theme, not just this week, but in general. We do it through driving the top line growth, not the expense of the bottom line, but we're about attracting customers, of course, retaining them, getting them to do more with us. So that's what we do. And it's about the short term and the long term. So short term, and you all know this, driving sales, targeted, rational, response-driven, but then balancing that with the longer term, the building the brand, maybe more emotional, more relevant, more memorable, driving those sort of that longer term brand and memories so that customers continue to come to us. In terms of impact in the boardroom, I think data has given us the ability to have more impact because we can talk more than ever about ROI and how we're driving that. But I think the vital thing for marketers, and I'll then hand back, is ensuring we speak the language of the business. We have great lingo, us marketeers. We have all the buzzwords, and frankly, they just don't translate. So probably the most important thing is speaking the language of the business with data and focusing on the ROI. And that's what I think gives us the higher impact in the boardroom because we can demonstrate the growth we're driving.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I think that's really interesting kind of segue into how you speak the language. And I want to turn to Julia in your role, which is a little bit of a different marketing role as you bridge in your role from marketing to sales and really focus B2B. Maybe you can talk about like the language that you pull together in the content that you create and the strategies you use to make those connections and really drive sales.
Happy to thank Claudia. Yep. And hello, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you for including me. I will say just to put a little bit of context, is that my role indeed is a little bit hybrid. It's a little bit different to probably like the traditional CMO. I'm somewhere between sales and marketing. I've spent most of my career in sales and capital markets. And I wanted to like highlight this because to one of the themes that we're talking about in terms of how the marketing roles are evolving, I think that in case of Citi, the fact that marketing came to my world came to marketing is an interesting testimony in terms of the evolution of the seat that we have at the table. And when I look about my organization right now, I have still parts of the sales. So I run corporate access. If some of you know financial services who would know it, it's a brokerage service that's part of equity advisory business in markets. It's a P&L. It's a platform. It's very client facing. In fact, we were just chatting earlier today what we think about our experiences in Davos, and one of the things that to me is so great about it is that I spent so much time with clients being here. So the client connectivity is my day to day. It's part of sort of like the DNA. It's how I'm wired. And then so when marketing came into my world, and at Citi I cover marketing for markets and banking. So I don't do consumer, and so there's a services which is a completely different sort of part of our proposition. In our marketing world, again, the lens through which we look at how we define it is very client facing. We don't really do many campaigns. A lot of it is how do we connect with clients? How do we think about the engagement? How do we think about moving the needle, whether it's to feed into the deal pipeline for our investment banking, whether it's connect with public sector group and corporate banking, whether it's giving the insight, and I know that we'll talk about content later. I'm excited about that because content is a big part of our client connectivity in markets. Because markets, it's very sort of like it's so transactional. It's like what happens today. So it's just a very different nature of that. But I think that going back to where we started, for what it's worth, like the interesting thing from my own experience is the conversions of sort of getting sales and the coverage and by colleagues who transact, who trade, and who look at how to enhance sort of like the deal pipeline for the firm. So our role is to work hand in hand with them, and very often we kind of view it as the extension of what they do. My team sits on the trading floor when it comes to market. So like we're really very sort of connected and embedded. But we have transitioned from being part of the business to a function that's a little bit more central, because we're looking sort of across a number of multiple businesses. So having that sort of more holistic seed brings value from a perspective being able to connect the dots, but coming from the business. So to the point of like the language, I very much agree with you. But just because we talk to clients all the time, like, so we hear what they need, we're able to pick up their vocabulary. A lot of members of my team are bankers or former sales folks, and they move across from my team back to coverage and sales and in between. And I make an effort to, when I look for talent, I don't think I have too many who have not had a stint in a product or in a sales or in a coverage role.
Interesting. Well, that's great. I think we want to shift kind of from the broader level down into probably, the subject that is a top priority for all of us, and that's AI. And I think, Sumit would love, you've really championed the connection between marketing metrics and business outcomes, and would love to hear how you're thinking and using AI to drive that growth.
So I get to be the AI guy in the room?
You get to be the AI in the room.
Okay, fair enough.
You're real. It's okay.
We think he's real.
I think by the end of it, you'll know.
He's real.
Okay, so I think, first of all, as most of us have learned it with a lot of experiments over the last 18 months or so, AI is not an incremental shift for a function. It's clearly a disruptive one. It's fundamentally changing the function in ways that most of us in our careers never imagined it would. So that's the scale at which AI is powering our function for sure. And what started off, AI itself, I guess it's hard to keep a tab on, because what started off as AI for automation very quickly progressed to generative AI, and now we are talking about agentic AI, and I'm not sure what we're going to be talking in 3 months. But I guess the fact is that at one end, we have to keep pace with the evolution of tech. And at the other end, we need to figure out its application, which started off from a huge promise of AI for efficiency, the low-hanging fruit. You get AI in, and suddenly 20% or 50% of your budget is released for other more productive activities. And we've realized in the last 18 months that some of that promise is surely true. You do get fair amount of efficiencies with AI. But I guess the bigger opportunity in my view is not the efficiency playbook, but it's more the experience and the effectiveness playbook. And at least we have realized that AI is unleashing creativity in a way we did not imagine it was possible. It's democratizing creativity. It's making our entire teams more creative, and as a result, it's helping all of us collectively push boundaries for creativity itself to take a new leap with human imagination. So that, I think, is a real potential that we've seen in bits and pieces, experimented with by a few brands, but I believe the best is yet to come. The other dimension is the effectiveness dimension. I think I'll go back with what Nina started with, and I think that's the topic of your larger conversation as well, in terms of the impact that marketing can truly make in the boardrooms. And that's where the elusive promise of personalization that we've all believed for almost a decade and invested in this tech stack and new technologies year after year, but it's still elusive. But I believe that with AI, I guess the reality is more closer than it has ever been, because suddenly you have capabilities to really ingest this data, structured, unstructured data, have a scenario of true personalization. Yes, it's still not been done, but I believe with the evolution we are seeing in AI, the entire spectrum of efficiency, experience, and effectiveness is going to be a reality and integral for us to be successful.
It's so, you just start thinking about the scope of the potential impact. It's almost overwhelming, but and Erika, I might shift to you to kind of pick up on some of the potential that Sumit starts outlining, and you can start to see it. Bain just published a study. 78 of executives agree that AI is the top priority as a top 5. I'd love, if you could kind of pivot off of where Sumit was talking a bit and talk about maybe the AI strategies that you see being employed across the marketing suite and those big unlocks.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I will just, as my own caveat, say I am the CMO of a B2B company and someone who was raised as a B2C practitioner. So I also have this strange blend. I think, Sumit, what you said resonates with me so much. I mean, the last 18 months have really been, in terms of generative AI and marketing, there's been 2 themes, right? Theme number 1 is efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. And theme number 2 is pilot, pilot, pilot. And I mean, my team has 35 pilots going, and my whole thing for them is we will end 2025 with scale. We will not end with pilots. We have enough little tinkering happening, no more tinkering. What I'm most excited about as we shift from tinkering to implementation is actually growth. And so I really believe that this year we will see the pivot from how much faster we can do creative and what we can do to push creative boundaries to getting back to, Nina, the point that you made of how are we actually driving growth. And that will look really different, at least from our perspective, on what's happening in B2B and what's happening in B2C. In B2B, sales teams spend 40% of their time, give or take, on basically the administration of sales. And generative AI and agentic AI can make, generative AI can make that whole process much, much more efficient. And so suddenly you now have a sales time with more time to sell, which means that more of the leads that the marketing team has generated can be acted on. That's a huge unlock. If you literally have almost double as much time to be able to go and be in market. And so suddenly the aperture of what we need to be doing in terms of generating leads gets much, much broader. That's a huge change. On the B2C side, I'm so with you on personalization. The way that I like to talk about this is we have actually had, from a straight machine learning perspective, for 5 years at least, the ability to talk about segments of one. And segments of one are interesting, but they're academic because they weren't executable. Well, now you actually have a place where you can create content for segments of one, which we've never been able to do before. And so Gen AI is taking even brands that are the most protective of their brands for great reasons and creating the ability to have content that no human is ever touching or seeing. And you don't have to sign off on every piece of content because you've been able to create parameters. And so this unlock of growth, either by giving sales teams double the amount of time or actually really being able to market to segments of one, is the unlock that we're going to see this year.
I mean, you start thinking about I want to go back to your tinkering, just another second question. So how do you manage the tinkering in the scope of everything else that's happening? Is it a separate, I'm still stuck on the tinkering with the 35.
I mean, everyone here will have different ways of doing it. One of the things that you and I talked about yesterday is how to keep teams excited about AI rather than running from AI. And so tinkering where you're explaining to people or setting the vision of what they can do with the time that they're unlocking, I think is what's really motivating. And that makes people want to tinker. And then at some point you have to look and say, for example, one of my teams was tinkering and they came up with this amazing thing that with AI now takes longer than it did before AI because they have raised the standards of output so much. I'm like, well, I'm not sure that's a tinkering we're going to continue with. But let's at least get in the direction.
Right.
I think that'll be a combination of enablement, encouragement, and audacity. I guess you've got to at some point of time, push the boundaries and say, let's try and make it happen. And you've got 3 months to make it happen because sometimes there is that sense of anxiety, there's this sense of the unknown, which pushes the teams back. And I guess that's where our role come into play, where you're making enough effort in enabling them with something which is a complete unknown, but at the same time, creating an environment where not choosing to do anything is not an option.
But you learn in the process, if I can.
Please jump.
Because
that's good.
especially when it comes to sort of looking at how the applicability of some of the technologies and some of the new tools that are coming into play, and a lot of it is new. So I think that, and we're all open to what that new means and how we interpret it. And I think that I certainly can say from our experience, we deploy some tool and then we see how do we tweak it? How do we adjust it? How do we, we try to do it in like sort of incremental so that the learning becomes part of the build out. So I do think that, and I often use the expression that we're like flying the plane as we're building it, but like there is a lot of that kind of because of the novelty that it's brought into the industry.
Nina, do you want to jump back in on how maybe you're employing AI? And I'm also intrigued because you're B2B and B2C.
Yeah.
So I don't know if...
Yeah, so if I think about AI, I sort of think about marketing on a value chain, right? So we've got insight, strategy development, creative development, iteration, of course, of that, targeting, media, et cetera, measurement. So along that sort of spectrum. And I think exactly to your point, I'm sure like many of us, we are doing pilots, sort of point solution pilots, often by actually plugging into third-party tools, because that means that we're able to do that in a way that's faster, because we recognize that we're not going to be able to keep up with that pace of development. So we're doing that. I think the key, again, exactly as you said, is when does it become, when can we scale that so it actually becomes part of the workflow? We are, and some of the specific pilots we're doing is around content generation and iteration. I think, obviously, we're a regulated industry. So that means that what we do, we have to do it with compliance, with transparency, with accountability. I think some of the things that are really front of mind are things like bias, accuracy, data security, and privacy, and also explainability. So all of those have to sort of be front of mind. One of the things I find really interesting we've been talking about, so we talk about creative, and absolutely AI will enable us to do more content development, more creative. I think what's interesting for me is what about the big ideas? So where will the big ideas come from? And I think that's where it has to be a partnership with human as well as AI. So we were talking, and if you don't mind, I'll sort of, so a couple of examples for me. One came. So sorry, who's from the UK? Okay, so Tango. Do you remember You've Been Tangoed? I mean, hysterical. So it's a ridiculous campaign that was in the 1990s for during the tango, and basically somebody went up and slapped lots of people and said, "You've been tangoed." I mean, it worked wonders. It ticked all the boxes of long and short of it, memorable, fame driving, but would that have come from an AI? I'm not sure. Or the other one I like is an Australian egg company, bear with me, called Honest Eggs. Has anybody heard of this example? Okay, so it's a free-range egg company, and their agency was VMLY&R. So how are we going to, what's the campaign idea behind promoting free-range eggs? So they came up with the idea of basically little fitness trackers, which they tied around the legs of the chicken. And then each egg had printed on it how far that chicken had free range had roamed. Again, what a creatively brilliant idea. Will that come from AI? I don't know. Now, what can AI with that idea take and do with it, to your point, to actually continue to grow? Because it's not just efficiency, I agree, it's effectiveness and push it up. Yes, but those gems of ideas, that creativity, that innovation, that's what we're about as marketeers. And I think, therefore, how we can harness AI to then do even more with that, that's what really excites me.
And that how you use that human piece and then use AI to take it to a place we can't even imagine.
Yeah.
How does that translate on the B2B side, maybe? Do you want to talk a little bit, Erika, because you do create content for, and how you're using and employing AI, or not? Oh, I'm sorry, I did that earlier.
That's right.
I'm so sorry, Julia.
That's fine. I think that there's just different ways. I think that as you're saying, like there's a lot of applicability in terms of when we think sort of from a brand, from an advertising perspective. I think like it opens a door to so many different other just like ways of thinking, and the creativity that just gets you to like a different pool of intelligence if you think about sort of like what artificial intelligence can do for you. So I think that the creative journey is probably one in our space that I could argue is the quickest beneficiary of of what I see sort of happening day to day. But I also want to kind of like flip it to the other side of things, because I think that we talked about it like when we met yesterday. I think that what's also interesting is like you sit there and you think like, what is the impact in terms of not the things that it will help you improve, do better, but how is it forcing you to think about how you do things differently? And differently in a sense that, like, I'll give you an example. Like we work a lot with content, and content means many things. But in our line of work, content is one of the core ways of how we connect with our client segment. And content changed, like the creation of content, the generation of content, the delivery of content has just become very different. And it's the shift has started, admittedly, with some of the regulatory changes specific to financial services, but I think it's much broader than just financial services. And I think that what AI and ChatGPT is giving us is an opportunity to get content instantly on any subject of quality and of some degree of accuracy. So when we're thinking about our own value proposition and we think about like, this is something that we used to sell, this is something that we used to trade, this is something that was a component of how we differentiate ourselves among our competitors. And we don't have that anymore because it's just so accessible, and it's accessible with arguably a certain degree of quality that makes the content creators in a human capacity just harder to compete. So it's forcing us to rely more on like, this is the impact, this is what we're accepting. So we're shifting to rethinking our sort of almost like operating model around content. There's a lot of more shift on the human being, because we kind of think that the human dialogue is something that AI still can't quite compete with in many ways. So that means that, if you have thousands and thousands of content creators that a firm like ours would employ, then you start to rethink, well, maybe that model is no longer the one that you need to move forward with. And then you think about bigger names, you think about more interesting content providers that offer slightly more, I don't know, like for the lack of a better way of describing it, like a white glove service. Like you have more meetings and more human interactions and more discussions. It's hard to do on scale because they're not as scalable. So you need to rethink about sort of like your entire universe of what that content looks like and which part you hand over to AI and which is the smaller part where you still find that niche to be a lot more competitive, and how do you get into that niche and what it looks like. So I think that the shift as a result of AI is everything from the opportunity and from sort of like some of the great things that we see coming, but also like there's some challenges and this challenge I think is it's very real. It's exciting because it's forcing us to think different, but it's not simple.
I would love to go deeper on the creative and the content because I think that it's more where my brain is, but I think I would love to shift a little bit to how we measure what's the return on investment of this. And maybe, Sumit, we can kind of come back in and talk a little bit also maybe about predictive analytics, but let's start maybe on ROI. How do we start thinking about how do you measure the return on...
I guess this is something Nina kicked it off right at the beginning, and possibly that's even the larger conversation we are having in terms of the impact marketing will make in the boardrooms if it actually is impacting the metrics that the boardroom cares about. And growth is certainly one of them. But I think what's heartening is whether if you see across this panel or across the room, the more conversations we are having as marketers, I think there's a significant realization within the C-suite community now that there is a very strong correlation between stronger brands and stronger growth, stronger brands and stronger shareholder yield, stronger brands and stronger premium, stronger brands and stronger market share. Now, if that realization is baked into the marketing matrix model, that's when marketeers become the engine for driving the vision that a CEO or a CFO is aspiring for. Now, it's easier said than done translating that into matrix, but then again, it's not that difficult anymore either by virtue of all the tech that we are sitting with. I guess the bigger challenge is short-term performance marketing orientation, which I think more of us have been able to crack by virtue of the MarTech stack and its correlation to the funnel and the win rate and all that stuff. That's much easier now, which should be a part of every marketeer's playbook. But I guess the long-term impact of marketing and brand investment and its correlation to market share gains and price premium is still nebulous. It doesn't have a straight line measurement. It more has a collaborative multi-touch point analysis, which is more driven by research. So I think that the job that we have as marketeers is to focus significantly on the quarter-to-quarter priorities without letting go of the long-term priorities, because quarterly priorities will give you the permission to have that leap of faith into investing in the long term, which will give you the long-term returns. And there's enough research and data to back up that conviction.
I think, you've put the finger on the pain point that I think everyone in this room, I'm sure, has, which is we have trained the world to think marketing is performance marketing. And so people immediately say, how did this campaign pay off? And let me see the immediate short-term results. And so, and then you look at all of the data about how consumers, whether those are consumers or B2B consumers, make decisions, which is that 50% of the time that you're thinking about something, you're not actually sending any signals that you're in the market. And so you have to be talking brand to build awareness. You have to be doing things at the top of the funnel. And yet we have trained, in particular, the financial community to be saying, tell me about the ROI on it. The ROI is explicitly going to be at the bottom of the funnel, the performance marketing. One of the things that I think, there's been, how many times in the last 10 years have we heard that we've cracked the black box of media mix optimization? I'm actually extremely optimistic that the leap forward in data, not in Gen AI, but just in general machine learning, will actually help us get to a place where we can start doing that. And we can actually go back and start putting value, real value, not hokey pokey sort of, but real value on brand marketing. Because it's the place that all of us, I think, have the biggest struggle, which is it's very, very easy to talk about returns on performance marketing. It ties to the pipeline. It either works or it doesn't. But here we are in a lovely brand marketing activation. If we don't solve that problem of how to have that conversation with the finance community, we will never be able to drive the growth. And I do believe that, I won't call it for 2025, but I do believe that within the next 36 months, we will actually be able to build, using each company's proprietary data, build the tool that will actually let us get to a place where we're optimizing media mix and can really point to long-term returns. So.
I'm wondering if we should pick up on that, which I saw lots of heads nodding, and we said we were going to go to the audience, and we're going to make this a bit of an in the round. And maybe I can actually call out, because Alex, you're here from Meta, and I'm sure you have an opinion on data platforms, CDP, predictive analytics. Maybe you want to get us going on the in the round style, and then we'll open up for some questions.
Hand the microphone around.
There you go.
Thanks, Sumit, for the 30 seconds notice. Yeah, I actually think this point, I'm very lucky, right? I run analytics and marketing for Meta, and that's always been my thing. I had websites at university and ran analytics and marketing for those. And I come up the direct response route, and I try to say all marketing performs, and I try and push away the performance marketing thing. And we have a very traditional CMO, Susan. She's awesome. She went to college in her teens because she was so good at math, and she understands Excel shortcuts better than I do. But she is open to the conversation about brand marketing. So if you look at WhatsApp, we do more brand marketing for WhatsApp than we do direct response marketing. And the reason we're able to do more brand marketing is because we've been able to prove WhatsApp has an awareness gap in the United States. The awareness gap is very clearly tied because about 40% are aware, about 30% use. And when we get people over the hurdle on awareness, we drive people down the funnel. And so we've been really good at explaining the top of the funnel there and how you move people down and through the funnel. And WhatsApp, similarly, we've rebuilt the privacy brand on WhatsApp internationally after the policy update in 2020 that really hurt the WhatsApp privacy brand, and we've driven it to new levels. It is considered the most private messaging service globally. So the way that for exactly this question that you guys were talking about, we manage it is long-term holdouts, clear correlations for brand marketing to downstream results over a longer period of time, years, and then being very clear about what can be measured and what can't be measured. And so we measure what can be measured very well, and then we draw a line and say, I can't measure Davos. Sorry. I think it's a good idea we do it. And I'm doing it for half the price we were before the pandemic. That's it. Either you're happy with that or not, Susan, but look at all the other stuff and therefore give me the space. So yeah, I mean, for us, I actually think we're there on brand impacting like the direct outcomes we care about. And I really focused on this rebranding of all marketing performs. And that's helped me with our finance community and some of our more difficult board members.
Interesting.
Was that what you wanted?
Yeah, that's great. Are there other questions in the audience that would like up for the panel? I have a bunch more, but I'm assuming there's some here. Wait, we'll give you the mic, John. Yeah.
Great conversation, and I think it's fantastic you put this on the agenda at Davos. Historically, we've been left at the corners and not actually having these roundtables and discussions about marketing. So in a genuine sense, well done for doing it. Did Infosys think you were crazy for suggesting this as an agenda item? Because going back to the first thing you said around raising the contribution of marketing to the boardroom, it's quite a brave move, actually, I would have said, to put this on the agenda for Davos. So how did that come about?
So, thank you, John, for coming and, of course, for putting me on the spot. I appreciate that. See, we've been coming here for about 25 years, Infosys. I mean, we've been activating this space for over a decade. If you were to, in addition to being a CMO, I'm also a CMO of a tech company that serves multiple buying centers. And believe it or not, people in this room are the second biggest spender on tech after the CIO. So why should it not have been on the agenda in the first place several years ago? Is the question to ask rather than why it is on the agenda. Having said that, I think the good news is that, I mean, if you look at the people in this room, and it was not the case even 3 years ago. We did not have so many marketeers actually walking into Davos. And I guess the transition signals a couple of things. One, marketeers are truly being seen as the accelerator of the growth agenda of the organization. And that's why for folks like us, and for folks like yourself, as much as Davos is about what happens in the Congress Center out there, I think the bigger Davos is happening outside the Congress Center when we're doing these conversations one-on-one, which is translating into not just great ideas and great conversations, but great business as well.
We were having a conversation yesterday, so we're going to go back to the audience, but I really, Nina, why don't you jump in on...
I'm going to jump in on two, actually.
Yeah,
because start there. It's interesting. So I've had, unfortunately, a long career in marketing. But it's really interesting who I partner with and who I've partnered with and how that's changed over time. So earlier in my career, albeit with FMCG, my closest partner in the organization functionally was sales. So the sales director, marketing, hand in hand. Then I moved into services, specifically hospitality. My closest partner really became HR, because how we delivered the experience through our people, hotels, so obviously HR. Now my closest partner is IT, because actually, what tech is doing to enable marketing. So it's very interesting how that shifted, exactly to your point. And then just going back to what you were saying in terms of, I'm really interested in the funnel. I'm very hopeful that with predictive analytics, I'm not an expert in that, by the way, that we can move from correlation to causal relationships so that we can actually say it's not just that it's correlated, but we know. And I think that's going to be really important in B2B, because I think about that funnel and the purchase cycles, the length of the purchase cycles in B2B. So often you've got your awareness consideration, but then the middle of that funnel, how do we measure what's happening there and our effectiveness there to the point that then we convert? It's easier in B2C because we've just got many more data points. But for B2B, I'm really excited about that potential, hopefully within 36 months, as you said.
Don't quote me on that.
You do it now.
Anybody you want to chime in at all on either the predictive analytics or the change in how we're working with tech and IT internally, externally? Are there any comments? Let's just want to see if the ball wants to be
I think
passed.
your point is brilliant, but I don't have much to add to it.
Okay.
I would add.
Yes.
I mean, I do think, and I love your point, and this is spot on, and it's great. But I also would add that it's actually becoming a two-way relationship. I think fruitful relationship, because I also noticed that how closely we work with our tech partners, but at the same time, I'm seeing how much our tech partners are learning from what we need. So I think that this is like a sort of it's a two-way process. So I think that us feeding into what the requirements are and what the needs are helping then some of our tech partners to come up with tools that we can then deploy.
I think that's so right. We have to be informed, demanding customers of our tech partners, of IT. Because we're the users, so I think that's
just telling them, because when we started this, it's just like, what do you have that I can use? And now it's become kind of like, this is what I need, so I need to figure out how to do it for me. And I think that has shifted.
And doing this both with internal resources as well as external partners.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that. I think it depends on the sector. I think that in financial services, which is the only sector I know. But I think that in financial services, because of data protection, because of firewalls, because of we're just so overly regulated, we can't use WhatsApp to so there's a million. I know, I'm looking at
We don't.
I know, so don't WhatsApp me. Right, exactly right. You can send me a heart, that's it. But I think that that's sort of the demand for our internal in-house tech partners has grown a lot more than us maybe going and looking for external. But then at the same time, sort of our internal talent, we source our talent from external firms. So in a way, it's we shouldn't just only think that, we're only inward looking because that's the only kind of partner that we have. But we broaden our talent base by going out to the marketplace and hire people from Infosys and Meta and many other great firms that are sort of that have the experience and the expertise and the knowledge. So I think I wouldn't necessarily be too cautious with its internal external. I think that the more interesting point is what do we need, and how do we help the industry, the tech industry, build what we need.
Just going to jump on that, and this isn't true just for marketing, it's true for every function, but we go back to the point you made about workflows, and we go back to AI, and the biggest single failure point that we are seeing is sponsorship of AI by the tech team instead of by the functions. Because if you ask the tech team to sponsor AI, what happens is they go and they come up with lots of solutions and have calculated all these savings, but they haven't changed the workflow at all. And so the whole thing comes to changing the workflow, and the tech teams won't know the workflow. And so you need, again, this is true in every function, but I could give dozens of examples in marketing specifically where we have a tech team that's taken whatever the latest, and there's so many external solutions. We don't need to build our own, so many point-to-point solutions, taken the latest and greatest and said, here's what we can do, but actually have forgotten to bring anyone on the marketing team along from a process perspective. And so nothing's actually changed, right? You've sort of come up with tools that can save time, but the people whose time is being saved aren't on board, or it's not sort of flowing in with the work. And so the partnership is really
Is
really
that changing how you? Oh, go ahead. You go.
And they don't. I think the onus has to now shift.
Yes.
From the tech team to the marketing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because if you truly want to capture the potential of AI, the foundation of AI is data.
Right.
And data, as we all know, is one complex mess in most of our organizations.
It's actually multiple complex
Yeah, rather multiple complex messes. And if you really need AI models are trained on data. Even if your data is not ready for AI, as an organization, as functions, we are not ready for AI. And for that to happen, the CMO-CIO partnership has to be literally tied at the hip. The other interesting thing I heard yesterday, yeah, sure. The other interesting thing is, we've talking about all the good things about AI, and we've spent a lot of time talking about that. But AI is also one of the single biggest threat to the brand reputations going forward. The misinformation, the bias triggered by AI. And therefore, for each of us to jump into the AI bandwagon, we need to jump along with the right set of guardrails, the right ethical considerations, the right responsible AI frameworks, serverless architectures and whatnot. And that's not the capability that sits within the marketing organization today, that sits within the tech organizations today.
So how
So I guess the partnership is not optional, it's mandatory.
Interesting. We know there's some questions here, so we're going to go right here. Just say your name. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Liz Taller. I'm the CMO of Canton Network. It's a layer one blockchain in the financial services space. Actually spent a good chunk of my time working with Julia at Citi. My fear is actually brand and trust and integrity, because to hear that we're giving content to sales teams, not knowing whether that is accurate, and they're representing the brand, because in a complex B2B sales environment, they are the brand. And not really putting control over it. I think that is one of our biggest risks in understanding how the technology works, how you talk about that technology in your industry, and how you make sure that how each sales team, and there's 22,000 people, I think, in some of the businesses you're talking about, represent that correctly. That's my biggest fear for branding.
Can I
Yeah. Why don't you jump on that one, Erika?
So agree.
I think it's a great question, and I don't have an answer, but just as an interesting factoid or sort of thought exercise, we all talk a lot about the risk of AI hallucination, and then we have 22,000 people out in the market that we can't control at all, right? If you look at the hallucination that comes from AI versus the hallucination that comes from 22,000 people, it is much easier to control the AI hallucination than the human hallucination. So it's a really interesting dialogue anytime you get into these conversations of, we are all rightfully very concerned about that. Yeah, we've done all of these things with call centers because, lots of people are turning call centers into agents, and people get very nervous. And so you can take two conversations that are happening in a call center, and one is AI, one is human, and you show them to people, and people are like, "Oh my God, this is terrible. How could this happen?" You're like, "That's the human."
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
So the discussion of bias and the discussion of hallucinations is, of course, so important, but it's actually an incredible unlock for getting us onto a much more controlled message than having 22,000 incredibly well-trained and well-intentioned humans.
But I think I'm so glad that you raised this point high. And I completely agree with you, because I think that also what we're seeing is that, like, we all, we work very closely with tech works very closely with us, like we sort of work with our partners. But I think that sort of as you cascade it further down the organization, I actually think that where there is not just that there's an opportunity, there's a risk, there's a need, there's like all those things in terms of making sure that everybody in an organization not only knows what tools are available, but knows how to use them. So like the accuracy point become interested not only in the sort of like this equation between like tech and human or human and tech, but also like when you shift it to human, then the question is like, how do you make sure that the users use it correctly? Right, exactly right. So the interpretation of it, the applicability of it, the benefits of it. And I think that very often what I see happens is that not having the full understanding, which is for no good or bad reason. It's just a question of learning. It's a question of finding the time to learn. It's a question for the organization to cultivate that learning and find the mechanisms to do it. But I feel like we all need to learn. Like I get intimidated by AI. Like I have like no idea what it is. So like I know it is like the more I know, the probably better use that I can like sort of pick up from it. So yeah, interesting.
Other questions from the group? Great, if you could just say.
Hi, my name is Edison from Huawei, a company that we provide ICT infrastructure and smart devices. And we do also digitization in different sectors. So I want to echo your views that you talk about data is very important. You talk about AI performance because we know there's always a sword hanging over our head asking us what's the value out of this campaign. Mm-hmm. So I want to share an example of how we look at data and how we use it. Last year I visited a coal mine one of the oldest industry in the world, and we do digitization in that coal mine. And basically what we do is that we standardize the language of the machine. Then because there are thousands of equipment underground cutting coal mines, then we standardize language, make them talk to each other, then data flows, and we generate over 170 million data every day, and put them into a platform, then create a digital twin above the ground where people, let me show you the picture.
Oh. Maybe me.
He just want to show off
I'm glad I have
world's
The phone.
first
I think this is
trifold
product
phone.
placement. I think this is product placement. Yeah.
You can see it. You can see it. It's cool.
Yeah.
Digital twin above the ground where people can watch and control remotely what activities
Interesting.
under the ground. So for the top manager of the mine, he used to think about the, for example, salary and number of people underground, above the ground, and the tons they get output. I mean, how many tons of the coal mine he gets every day from. But by using AI tools incorporated into this platform, now all this data are fed into the financial results, how this creates, how much values all these activities, operations create values for the business.
Interesting.
So this is an example of how AI changed the way people using data.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Are there other questions? Because that kind of triggered. Okay, let's go to another question.
Hi, Cristobal with Brand Finance, just to mirror Edison's advertising. I am probably the only non-CMO in this room, and I wonder, you talked a lot about AI improving the workflow, and I wonder how has AI improved yours in the boardroom in your discussions with the CFO?
Are there examples of that, or maybe there's an
no, I can possibly give you an example. For us, AI is another tool to do what we do. So AI is not a magic wand. It is another technology, a very powerful technology, suddenly letting you do things that you've always done to be able to drive results that you want to drive. So there have been campaigns in the last 18 months. I mean, I'll give you a very, the boring product. Don't tweet it, okay? The more boring product that we potentially end up producing as part of our conversation I was telling Jennifer yesterday is an annual report, right? I mean, some of us are who also handle the communication function are in the process of creating these annual reports. CFOs love it; they have to get it created. Board members review it, and you want to actually get those things nicely done, packed, and delivered. And they've been done a certain way for decades and decades. After all, it's a bunch of numbers and possibly some stories. We said, all right, since we are actually embracing this Gen AI at scale, what can we do with Gen AI to get the shareholders have some fun with the annual report? So we actually created this platform where we gave the shareholders an opportunity to create a completely personalized cover for their annual report and actually insert their own face in that cover. It was a very simple interface. You go and select a couple of pre-laid templates, and then you have a trigger where you can, your face gets captured, and it beautifully creates a fantastic cover. Now, shareholders, we didn't even know they were going to use it or not. I mean, come on, they're only interested in quickly flipping through, but we were surprised that not just hundreds, thousands of them actually experimented with that product. The reason I'm giving you that example is that what AI is doing is helping us do stuff that has never been possible before. It's helping us elevate the potential of creativity, and that hopefully will contribute towards the right balance between the short-term and the long-term brand impact. Just an example of how your conversations in the boardrooms can become more interesting powered by a new ally that you have.
There's more questions. Okay, great. Lynette. Hi.
So Lynette from Siemens, I'm just interested, how do you get your inspiration and learn? Because I think we're all at this piloting and I think fiddling stage. Where do you get your solid information to be inspired to take your steps?
I'll start. I mean, I think it's conversations like these, talking a lot with our agencies, with our partners, and spending the time to really learn from them. Also, the internal teams, listening to where some of the pain points are that we think we might be able to address. But it is a really important question because it is changing so quickly. And in fact, I think somebody said yesterday, it's up to us to imagine actually how this is going to be applied. I think it's going to be one of our biggest challenges is almost taking all this and sort of bringing it down and saying how it's going to be applied. So right now, it's the conversations, particularly with third parties, to see what everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm. The question, I don't know if everyone heard the question, where do you get your inspiration to test AI concepts?
Yeah. And I agree, absolutely, third parties. I agree, conversations like this. The third thing is go find 25-year-olds on your team and ask them what they're doing. It's an amazing source of learning, and those ideas aren't always scalable, and often the things that they're tinkering with are things that exist as third-party solutions. But it's really interesting, and it's kind of we just had an Olympics where we invited our teams globally to create things and
an AI Olympics.
Yes, and actually we have a partnership with OpenAI. OpenAI judged the Olympics for us of sort of best applications, but
very fun.
Not all of it is scalable, but you get these really interesting nuggets of here's an interesting way to take data that we haven't thought about how to use before.
Actually, sorry, just to revise. So we do hackathons. So we've done a couple hackathons now, and Barclays come with those ideas. But to your point, so my not quite 25, 23-year-old daughter is studying AI. So when I have these conversations, she's like, to your point, she's like, oh, wow, we're so far ahead there. So you're right. Talk to the young people.
Mine is studying climate, so that's how it gets it.
Climate. I think we put those two together. I think there's a business happening over here.
I would agree. So I have a 19-year-old, so he tells me what to do, and I've learned to listen. It took me a while, and then I think that's also when I think about sort of who are our competitors. I used to think that our competitors are like banks, and what they do is they do some of the things. And now I think actually our competitors are tech companies. So when I look at the tech companies, when I look at what they do, that give me ideas of what we should be doing, and then how it all kind of.
And just to reinforce Alex's point of view,
right.
I get my best ideas from outside the industry.
Right, so we should none of us know what we're doing. That's the conclusion of the panel. We can finish now.
I think we have time for one more question. Maybe if it's quick, maybe two.
All right, I'm just going to ask Greg de Klerk from Rockwell Automation, global leader in industrial automation. I'm based in Belgium. When we talk about AI, we talk about data, and we tend to really look at our own business data, especially in marketing. We look at all the source of it. But the true value, especially then we play in ecosystems, especially B2B to B2C. Have you come across use case where you're sharing data between company, and how are you convincing a partner to share his own data in order to be more impactful on the business?
I think we have the expert in the room who can answer that question.
Excuse me?
I think you have an expert in the room who can answer that question.
Sorry, I literally just got a message and I got distracted.
So the question was about is there a platform where we all have our individual data? Is there a platform or a case study where we've seen multiple folks sharing data?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is actually a really interesting question. So for us, we're in a place where we didn't expect this to happen. Privacy has become a credit for us with Llama, which if you think about our brand and our company, that's insane. Because people don't want to share their data. And so people want to employ Llama and put it in a virtual private cloud or in their private cloud, specifically because they can put their data into it, they can play with it, and they know that it's not going to go and be used. So I don't have very good examples of where people have proactively shared their data. The places where it is happening is Google's ranking, our ranking, and so on for ads. So there is an exchange there. When someone clicks on your ad, that data is used to rank all of the other ads in the system. And so that's both on Google, on us, on Snap, on TikTok, and all the others. That is a place where you're getting better results because people are merging their data. And the reason those platforms are doing so well right now is generative AI. Like, that is how we've all recovered from ATT, specifically using these multimodal models, using aggregated data across multiple companies. So that would be a place where it is being used, and it's sort of terms of using the platform. So did that answer your question?
It does. In a certain way, for me, it's like repaying Google, Meta, and all those guys by giving our data to them, which is great. But in a certain way, I'm trying and taking the example from Huawei around an ecosystem in industrial automation. It's nice to have machine. The true value is be able to connect the data you generate on predictive maintenance directly with the manufacturing of the spare parts. Then you have a supply chain control, and you can really be circularity and all that kind of stuff and reduce your carbon footprint. Then the model there is really where, for me at the moment in my customer, like, okay, you know what, I see you guys, you want my data, but it's my data, it has value. Why I give it to you? Where is the business value of it? From a marketing perspective, you want to create a campaign, get your customer in B2C. Okay, I'm sharing the buying behavior, middle-aged people, old women, young women, whatever, they're buying that. You're giving that to Meta. And Meta is reselling that data to somebody else. I think there is an ecosystem of partner that needs to work together to create.
I think you folks need to have a chat.
We have 1 minute left.
1 minute. Was it a quick question? Who wanted over here? If not, I can do a rapid wrap. Okay, there was one more here. I don't know. You guys thumb wrestle it.
Hi, Laura Bonamici from Fujitsu. I just wanted to perhaps finish on the human, circling back to the beginning of the conversation. We talked a lot about creativity. I've been married to an artist for a very long time, so my biggest learning is that creativity takes courage. And we live in a time where AI is perhaps giving us that anxiety. Okay, so how do we unlock the creativity? What are we doing with our teams, to create that space where the time they're saving on mundane tasks can be spent on elevating, to your point, and also perhaps helping them to think more critically, so to ask the right questions, because I like to think of AI for answers and humans for questions, and that's what drives progress. So I was interested in your thoughts.
I think that's our job as marketing leaders, is to actually enable our teams to do exactly that. So I heard something yesterday, I'm not taking credit, AI, about automation, then augmentation, and then agility. So how do we help our teams? How do we upskill them? How do we bring in also new talent and give them the safe space to do exactly what you're saying? But I think that's what we have to do.
Any other thoughts on that? I was beautifully.
No, yeah. I firmly believe that a year from now or 2 years from now, the creative leaps we'll collectively take would be much larger than what we have taken in the past, only because the AI is available to make all our teams a little more creative than they are by virtue of getting them access to tools. But then again, the leaps will be taken by human imagination, because that's where the freedom is now to create something original. And to create something original, you have to really rely on your best people who will help you take the next leap, because the base has anyway been raised. So that's the way I look at it.
Well, this has been a fabulous discussion. I want to end just with everyone having one last word. And so just let's pretend it's 2028 and we're back here and we're doing our CMO gathering. And what would be the one word, right, 3 years from now, you might use to describe your role, the Chief Marketing Officer role, and how AI has kind of changed it? What would be the word you might use?
I think our role has been transformed.
Transformed.
Say, yeah.
I think AI is second nature.
Boardroom impact.
Boardroom
the 36 months, I'll give it till 2028.
I agree with all three views, but I probably would still feel like we still don't know what we're doing.
Well, on that, I just want to say thank you to the incredible panel of experts. Thank you to the room for engaging and making this an in the round. And let's keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you.